Hey guys, it's Pierre at RotoBaller. I am the lead editor for the NFL Fantasy Football, and I'm here to help you set your lineups for Week 3. Going to talk about my favorite running backs that you must start and some guys to keep on the bench. Make those tough decisions at the RB position, maybe your flex. You're not sure who to start, so let's get into it. I'm going to talk about one guy that I think you absolutely must keep in your lineup, despite the fact that he didn't do very well last week, and that is Kenyan Drake. I get the fact that it was a dud. A lot of you thought he might be in for a big game with Josh Jacobs out. Well, we're going to get a chance to see one more time. Looks like Jacobs won't play. According to John Gruden, the official term is very questionable. All right, so that's different from questionable. There's kind of questionable. There's definitely quite okay. So Kenyan Drake is probably going to play quite a bit, and that's fine. But what is he going to do with those touches? He didn't do anything last week. Let's keep in mind he went against the Steelers, and the Steelers are right now the number 2 run defense. Of course, you could say, well, that's because they held Kenyan Drake in check in week 2, but they were a top 10 run defense last year. You know, they're banged up, all sorts of injuries, but still a tough assignment for Drake. Gets a little bit easier matchup against the Dolphins, and the Dolphins not just a little bit less formidable on run defense, but also is a team that is hurting on offense. Of course, without Tua, their offense is just struggling to get things going. I don't think game script will be a big issue. Also, you have to think about running back value. It's always about who's going to get touches, how many touches. So Drake is getting the receptions, even with Jacobs in the lineup in week 1. 5 catches. Last week, 5 catches. Didn't get a ton of run, but I think, again, because the Dolphins not necessarily bound to put up a ton of points here, they will be able to establish the run more. So I like Drake this week to bounce back. Now, when I say must start, does that mean you have to put him in everywhere? It always depends on who your other options are. I'm not putting him in over another top 15 running back, let's say, but if you do have a tough choice between him or some of the other guys I'll mention later that you might have always be starting, then I would say go with Drake. But you'll get to those in a minute. So let's go on to our next must start. Damien Harris. Now, Damien Harris, you think, why wouldn't I be starting him? Well, this is actually a negative matchup for him going against the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans, didn't have their act together last week at all. Of course, all the situation with the coaches being on the COVID list. Ian Book, the backup quarterback, was calling plays and all sorts of madness. Forget that. It's a new week. New Orleans will be back, and run defense is one of their specialties. But I'm here to tell you that Damien Harris, pretty much from here on out, is a must start. So this isn't really so much must start based on matchup. It's a don't sit. Don't get worried about the defensive matchup. Don't get worried about James White is still there. James White has always been there. He always will be there. Damien Harris, his bread and butter is not as a receiver. It's that he can run north-south, get to the hole. He's going to be the guy used basically every down except for the obvious passing downs in the goal line, in the red zone. It's Damien Harris. I realize James White did vulture a touchdown last week. It will happen from time to time, but Damien Harris is still the guy. Cam Newton's not there to take those touchdowns on the goal line anymore. So Damien Harris, again, he's a solid play. 23 carries and 16 carries each of the first 2 weeks. They're going to ride him. Bill Belichick actually putting his trust in a running back. That should tell you something. And Ramondre Stevenson is a guy who was a healthy scratch last week. There's nothing to worry about in terms of competition. So keep Harris locked in, is what I'm saying, regardless of matchup, including this week. I don't think the Saints are going to be a team, again, that's going to take New England completely out of their game plan because, well, Jameis Winston is looking like the old Jameis Winston, could be turning the ball over again. I think that'll be a pretty close game. All right, now let's move on to another guy I think you must start, and based this time on matchup is Tyson Williams. Look, there is going to be a committee. We know this. Tavius Murray's there. He got, a fair amount of carries, 9 rush attempts last week. Devontae Freeman actually saw some action. But Tyson Williams is still technically the lead back for what it's worth. But not just that he saw more carries than Latavius Murray. He did a lot more with them. All right, so right now, I know it's early, it's a small sample, but right now, Tyson Williams averaging 6.5 yards per carry. He's doing the most he can with his touches. And you have to realize it was a shootout last week. They didn't get to really establish the run as much as they liked. I mean, Lamar Jackson did his thing. But again, going against Kansas City, it was a different kind of game. Now they get to go against Detroit. I mean, you pretty much want to start and stream everybody you can against Detroit all season long, but this could be a game where Williams feasts because he will get even more rush attempts. And again, Murray is not necessarily a pass catching back. Williams is the guy who's going to lead the way there. So it's maybe more of a 1A, 1B situation if you want to call it that. But Williams is technically the lead back in Baltimore and gets a great matchup. You have to love it. I think also Lamar did miss a day. He's just a stomach bug. It's not an issue. He'll be playing, but I think they'll give his legs a little bit of a break in this game. I don't think he'll have to push himself quite as hard as he did against Kansas City. All right, now, must sit. Talked earlier about a guy like Drake. Who would you start him over? How about James Robinson? Okay, so Robinson's a guy you thought that you'd be able to play every single week, especially once Travis Etienne was out for the season. Robinson was going to get a ton of touches, and that's just not happening because Jacksonville is that bad. Should I say Urban Meyer is running this team into the ground? Somehow they look worse than last year. This is the team that did get the number 1 overall pick, and it's not made them better. Trevor Lawrence was just miserable last week. Look, I don't put it all on his shoulders, but still, there's something to worry about now with the fact that he's thrown 5 interceptions in 2 games, and his completion percentage is well below 60%, so not good look. But again, if the pass offense is struggling, the run offense is not going to do much better because, again, the turnovers, the terrible defense, all of it's going to conspire against James Robinson. He's actually not doing too badly, averaging 4.5 yards per carry, which is the same as he did last year. He's just not getting to touch the ball because, again, it's always negative game script. Only 16 carries in the first 2 weeks. That's not going to do it for fantasy. It doesn't matter how effective you are unless you're ripping off huge runs or scoring multiple touchdowns, which he's not. And this week, guess what? They get to face Arizona Cardinals. What are the chances that Arizona doesn't put up 30 points again? They've scored 38 and 34 their first 2 games. Now they get to face Jacksonville. It's not looking too good for James Robinson to get a ton of touches. So you absolutely can bench him. And so one of those other running backs I mentioned at the top, Tyson Williams, Kenyan Drake, not necessarily every week starts. You can put him in over a guy like Robinson this week. You could also fade Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So kind of like what I said with Damien Harris is going to be, for me at least, an every week must start going forward. I'm not going to start Clyde Edwards-Helaire at all until I see something from him. But, it's easy for me to say that because I don't have him anywhere. I didn't draft him anywhere last year. Didn't draft him anywhere this year. This isn't I told you so. I'm saying that the fantasy community is overreacting to the fact that he's on Kansas City because that offense, as prolific as it is, it runs through 3 guys. That's Pat Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. Mecole Hardman will never be a thing. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not, and I don't think will be a thing in fantasy. What we were all excited about, and by we, I don't mean myself personally, but what everyone was looking at was the fact, oh, he's such a great pass catcher. Look at what he did in college. And this is a perfect fit for the offense. Brian Westbrook comparisons. He's caught 3 passes in 2 games this year. Last year, he wasn't in the top 10 in receptions for running backs. He's not going to be this year. He is not being used that way. It's just not part of that offensive scheme. And you know what? He's really not getting enough touches in general to be relevant. This is a guy who has, 43 and 47 rushing yards each of the first 2 weeks. And now going against the Chargers, which is a good, not amazing defense, but this could be a high-scoring game. That actually works against him because this is a game where you feel like there's going to be more passing involved. It's not going to be a game where they're going to try to feed a running back. Not that they ever feed a running back. They just don't. That's not Andy Reid's style. Even when they're ahead, this team passes. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a hard fade for me this week for sure. And I really think we just need to start tempering expectations big time for him going forward. And then finally, let's talk about the Rams. Now, I put both on here, Rams running backs, because I do realize Darrell Henderson is banged up. This is somebody who looked really good the first 2 weeks. I will admit that. There's nothing wrong with the way Henderson's been performing, but very questionable going into this game. Well, I think he's just questionable, not very questionable. That's Jacobs. But Henderson might not play. We don't know for sure. Game time decision. You never want one of those, in your lineup, and then you get the rug pulled out from under you on game day. Sonny Michel, then you think, okay, well, if Henderson doesn't go, I got Sonny Michel. I'll put him in there. he didn't look too bad last week either. Averaging 4.6 yards per carry, and he can catch the ball too. If he's the only guy there, that actually seems promising, and especially going against it's the Rams in Tampa Bay. That should be a very high scoring game. That might be a game where touchdown opportunities, Michelle might catch some passes. But here's the problem. Tampa Bay, if there's one thing they're really good at, besides having Tom Brady, it's run defense. This is a team that is limiting their opponents to 3 yards per carry so far. Again, very small sample size, but they did it last year. They were actually the best last year. 3.5 yards per carry allowed to running backs. They were number 1 in the NFL. Vita Vea actually looks like a stud in the making. That defensive line is no joke. They've been shutting down running backs. They're going to continue to do that. And even though this might be a high-scoring game, it's probably going to be between the two quarterbacks. It's not going to be the running backs who are doing all the work here. So I say whoever plays, if it's Henderson or Michelle or both, just sit them. Just don't take the chance. It is not worth it. You're not going to get what you hoped for out of them in this lineup. All right, those are some of my must starts and sits at running back week 3. Hopefully this helps you. Of course, you want all the latest rankings and updates and news. You know where to go. It's rotoballer.com. All right, guys, thanks for watching.